だから悪い人間といい人間の区別は匂いでわかる。こいつはせえゲロ以下の匂いが分泌された。
Okay. The show begins by reenacting the secret origin of Sir Isaac Newton. That's true, look it up. You see an asshole named Dario Brando attempting to rob a carriage wreck of George Joestar, but to his surprise, Joestar survived and thinks that he was trying to save his life, and in turn promises him a single favor. Because if I wake up from a near-death experience and see some guy rifling through my pockets, the first thing I think is that guy must be there to save me. Cut to a mere 12 years later, we see our protagonist, Jonathan Joestar, aka the titular Jojo, as he saves a young girl from some douchebags, and by that I mean he gets his ass handed to him and they run away laughing at him. Upon thanking him for saving her, he says this. Such a true gentleman. Meanwhile, we see the asshole from earlier now dying of disease-itis telling his own son, Dio, to go live with the Joestars for the favor he was promised, and in the process try to steal all their money. Dio, despite being poor, is rather smart, as shown by the fact that he plays chess and reads books, as of course only smart people do. But yeah, Dario dies and Dio literally spits on his grave and goes to live with the Joestars. Upon his stylish arrival, Jonathan is waiting to greet him. Dio, however, opts to do this. Of course, Dio isn't yet done being the literal worst and decides to fuck over Jonathan in every aspect of his life for seemingly no other reason than because he can. And if he hasn't made it clear enough that he hates Jojo, he opts to beat the hell out of him in a boxing match, which apparently kids did for fun back in the 1800s. Personally, I'd have rather gone with that weird hit the hoop with the stick thing, but whatever. Jonathan's life has turned to shit because Dio, and as it seems like he's at his lowest, who should be there but the girl from earlier? However, this time instead of being standoffish, the two actually hit it off and begin a relationship. It all seems like it's looking up for our hero until... And there it is, undoubtedly the most well-known line of this entire series. Thanks, Internet! Upon finding out what Dio did, Jonathan is furious and confronts... But it would seem as though... still outmatches him. However, Jonathan manages to find the strength within himself to fight back against him, laying a cathartic beatdown for both himself and the audience. During their fight, some of... blood gets on a mysterious stone mask hanging on the wall, causing a bizarre effect. Once Dio starts crying like a wuss, George comes in, interrupting their fight and sending them to their rooms. Oh, and Dio had a knife on him because of course he would. In retaliation for Jojo's deserved retaliation, Dio kills Jonathan's dog because if it's not clear yet, Dio is the absolute worst person to ever live. It should be now. 7 years later, Jack the Ripper is doing that thing he's most known for, and the narrator foreshadows that the stone mask from before will in fact be used in accordance with the rule of Chekhov's gun. Catching up with our main characters, Jonathan and Dio now graduating college and star players of their rugby team and seemingly getting along now. However, in truth, they both still completely hate each other. George has also fallen ill of what he believes to just be a bad cold, which raises suspicions of Jonathan due to Dio's unusual kindness and insistence that George shouldn't go to the hospital. Though to be fair, hospitals in the 1800s weren't exactly up to the standards we have today. Jonathan is also studying the stone mask, finding out that the spikes are activated by blood. Jonathan also manages to find a letter from Dio's father Dario to George telling about his illness, which happens to have many of the same symptoms as what George has come down with. Jonathan confronts Dio about his suspicions, which Dio confirms with a swift punch to the face. But Jonathan's massive growth in size isn't just for show, as he takes the punch like a champ and tosses Dio over the railing, which he just shrugs off because injury is apparently nothing serious in this world and opts to expedite his plans. Jonathan heads to London to try to find an antidote for Dio's poison. While in London, Jonathan encounters a group of street thugs led by REO Speedwagon. Yeah. And he has the Oddjob hat from Goldeneye, but Jonathan doesn't care because he can also just shrug off severe injuries as if they were nothing. He continues to fight off the goons and deals a not-so-finishing blow to Speedwagon, which guarantees that he will follow Jonathan as his utmost loyal friend for all eternity. Which sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I mean, I've made all my friends through kicking.
Kicking? Oh, I want to do some kicking!
Meanwhile, Dio is wandering drunk through a back alley celebrating Jonathan's assumed death at the hands of street thugs, some more of which try to assault Dio, but he didn't get super buff for nothing, making short work of one thug and testing out the stone mask on the other, which in this case produces a fancy light show when stabbing him in the head. The lights weren't for nothing as the guy is transformed into a vampire, now completely outmatching Dio, only to be killed by the convenient rising sun. Of course, once Jonathan returns to the mansion, he confronts Dio about his crimes, having brought along the police. Dio tries to deceive Jonathan with a sob story about his upbringing, but luckily Speedwagon also decided to come along and is easily able to to see through Dio's ruse. However, things get much worse as Dio stabs George, killing him and using the stone mask on himself, just as the police open fire on him. However, as expected, Dio is transformed into a vampire. The bizarre part of the adventure has truly begun. Vampire Dio kills all the police officers, and Jonathan attempts to stop him by burning down the mansion in a one-on-one showdown with Dio, which, despite being a regular but absurdly muscular guy taking on an equally muscular vampire, Jonathan actually manages to hold his own better than you would think, in that he doesn't get instantly murdered by the guy who can walk up walls. The fight between the two takes them all over the mansion as it burns around them, with Jonathan managing to impale Dio on a statue of the Joestar family guardian angel, which, if you're thinking it wasn't doing its job, well, now just wait until you see what this family has coming later in the series. Jonathan somehow manages to get blown out the front door, just barely surviving the encounter. Of course, he's not the only one to be so lucky. Jonathan wakes up to see Irina, now an adult, helping tend to his wounds, and as they're reconnecting, who should we see listening in but Speedwagon, who decides to depart, or as he puts it, Jojo and Irina, while walking together later on, encounter the Monopoly guy, aka William Zeppeli, who punches Jonathan in the stomach, which manages to heal his broken arm and bestow him with powers similar to that of Zeppeli's, which he demonstrates by punching a rock through a frog. He explains that this ability is called Hamon, or the Ripple, depending on who your translator is, and we see that Jonathan is seemingly a natural, managing to cause a tree to grow flowers unintentionally. Zeppeli continues to deliver exposition, telling Jonathan that Dio is still alive and that he needs Jojo's help to destroy the stone mask. As this is happening, we see Jack the Ripper again committing another murder, now being confronted by an injured Dio and the poison dealer wanting to recruit him into an army of the undead. Later, as Jonathan is being trained in Hamon, Zeppeli tells how the stone mask has brought a fair amount of misery to his own life, including taking the life of his father, that being the reason he decided to learn Hamon so that he would be able to destroy the mask. We then learn from Speedwagon that several people have gone missing in the town of Woodnight's Lot. This of course could only be Dio's doing because the plot needs to progress. And so they make it happen, as the three of them are off to investigate the town. On their way to the town, their carriage suddenly stops in a tunnel, which of course it would with BoJack Horseman driving. He's probably passed out drunk, and then a zombified Jack the Ripper jumps out of the corpse of one of the horses, now decked out in skin knives. A daring fashion choice to be sure. Jack escapes into a tunnel and Zeppeli gives Jonathan a test, because what else would a mentor figure do in this situation? Jonathan is tasked with defeating Jack while not spilling the contents of a glass of wine. Of course, as most mentor lessons do, Jonathan learns how to use Hamon better by killing Jack through a wall using what would become the signature Hamon technique, Overdrive. When they actually get to the town, they get their stuff stolen by a kid named Pogo. In order to catch up to him, Jojo and Zeppeli use Hamon to walk on water. Insert Jesus reference here. Once they catch up with the kid, they are attacked in a graveyard by several zombies resurrected by Dio, because of course he can resurrect the dead.
Did you wreck the car?
No.
Did you raise the dead?
Yes.
But the car's okay. Alright then.
Zeppeli decides to go ahead and attack Dio head-on, but Dio counters by freezing Zeppeli's arm, which can apparently stop Hamon. How did Dio know what Hamon is? Well, this is because of part of the manga that the anime cut out, in which one of Dio's henchmen spies on Jonathan and then informing Dio of Jonathan's Hamon training. This is the only time I'm going to bring up the manga because this is a plot hole the anime created that wasn't in the original. Getting back to said story, Dio calls out two particularly powerful zombies and former knights named Targus and Bruford. While Jojo tries to hold his own against them, Speedwagon uses his hot abs to unfreeze Zeppeli's arm. The fight between Jonathan and Bruford ends up leading into a nearby lake, which is a problem. In order to use Hamon effectively, you need to breathe, which doesn't sound like it'd be much of a weakness, but it turns out breathing is harder to keep up than you'd think, which seems logical now, but as I assure you, it will seem more ridiculous as we see more of these situations. But I digress. As Jojo tries to figure out how to breathe underwater, he comes to the conclusion that since it's actually a coal mining town, there would naturally be a deposit of breathable air under some rocks at the bottom of the lake. Eat your heart out, Bear Grylls, that's a real survival tip. But yeah, having gotten a breath of air, he can counterattack Bruford using some new technique, the Turquoise Blue Overdrive, which is like the other Droverai, but now has a delicious berry flavor. In true anime fashion, this attack doesn't finish him off, and Bruford counterattacks using his hair to tie Jojo to a tree. How he does this is not explained, as his backstory implies he had this talent even when he was alive, so I guess it's just part of the whole bizarre thing this series is about. As he's about to finish off Jojo, he manages to counterattack and defeat him. In this instance, the Hamon attack manages to get Bruford to regain some of his humanity instead of just killing him like it did Jack the Ripper. Somehow. But during this moment of repentance, he offers Jonathan his sword, Luck, giving it a new name, Luck and Pluck, neither of which Jonathan actually has much of if you think about it. Then Bruford dies. The moment is cut short though, because there's still another zombie knight to deal with as Targus takes his turn to attack them. But before he can get to them, Jonathan and Zeppeli use a technique that spans generations, and run away. In this instance, using leaves as a hang glider. With his usual mastery of timing, Zeppeli reminisces about his own Hamon training with his own master, a Tibetan monk named Tom Petty. Back in the current story, Tarkus tries to go after them, but goes through a wall in a castle that seems to have come out of nowhere. I don't recall seeing a castle in any of the previous scenes, but sure. Jojo et al. Land on the castle, and Jonathan ends up trapped inside a deathmatch room for a one-on-one with Tarkus. That one-on-one being a deathmatch where they're both chained to the ceiling, which, since this is supposed to be a training area, I feel like this is a bad way to train people since one of them has to die in order to leave, but whatever. Zeppeli and Speedwagon are trapped on the other side, but don't worry, the kid who is still there, for some reason, crawls through a window and opens the door for the important characters. Zeppeli decides again to flash back at the worst time and remembers his master Tom Petty telling him that he would die in this exact sort of situation. Well, that put a downer on leg day, but in order to fulfill his mentor role of the hero's journey, Zeppeli decides to fight anyway, obviously getting killed, but he transfers his Hamon onto Jojo, which helps make him stronger somehow. This doesn't exactly fit with how Hamon seems to work in every other situation, but whatever, it has kinda loose rules, as we see later on. But enough about later parts, Jonathan manages to use his new strength to break the steel bonds he was trapped in and defeat Tarkus. Zeppeli, who is somehow still alive despite being cut in half, says his goodbyes and dies for real this time. Jojo, Speedwagon, and the kid who is still with them cremate his body, and Speedwagon inherits his hat because the rest of the characters declared no odd jobs for the rest of the arc, I guess. The three continue toward the town, learning from an encounter with a zombie lizard man thing that the town is most likely already under Dio's control. The three of them end up encountering a mysterious assailant who confirms their suspicions and, does this.
しかしスローな蹴りだ。
The man's name is Dyer, and despite his poor choice of attack methods and haircuts, we find out that he trained with Zeppeli, being joined by another man named Straits, and Master Tom Petty, having been asked by him to come and aid in the fight against... and is revealed that Poco's sister has been kidnapped by Dio. Why he hasn't just killed her is anyone's guess. A short while later, we see her about to be attacked by one of Dio's zombies, only to be interrupted by Jonathan, who doesn't even care that he has snakes on his head, simply kicking his ass in short order and moving on, because Jonathan is just that cool. The group continue on through the castle to confront Dio, and despite the insistence of his zombie minions, opts to fight Jonathan himself this time. However, before Jojo can engage, Dyer interrupts, wanting to avenge the death of Zeppeli. Unfortunately, he still insists on using his terrible attack, and Dio counters with his freezing ability, which now can apparently freeze a person's entire body and crushes him. Oh, Dyer, you will not be missed. But hang on, Dyer has seemed to manage to survive as just ahead for long enough to shoot a rose into Dio's eye. But enough stalling, as the time has come for Jonathan to have a showdown with Dio, drawing his sword and preparing to go on the offensive. However, Dio, once again showing that deep down he's a complete wuss, just calls his horde of zombies to deal with everyone instead. This ends up being not much of a problem, as the Hamon monks manage to hold them off with little to no trouble at all. And so the showdown begins again, as Jojo manages to slice up Dio with his sword, and Speedwagon providing commentary along the way. Oh, so very helpful, Speedwagon. However, Dio's not finished being OP yet, as he can now freeze Jonathan through his sword and begins monologuing about how he's basically won. But Jonathan has his fair share of breaking how heat conduction works and manages to thaw himself out with a blade of his sword having been in a flame of a nearby torch. Okay, Dio hasn't finished monologuing yet, as after freezing a punch from Jojo, he continues to exposit about how awesome he is. But Jojo has one final trick up his sleeve, putting his Hamon punch through a flame in order to bypass Dio's freeze attack, sending Dio off the edge of the castle, and he tries one last attack to kill Jonathan, being, vampire eye lasers? Okay, they say it's fluid, but it looks a lot like lasers to me. But in his victory, Jojo is somewhat saddened, even though Dio has been a complete douche literally every moment he's known him. But hey, at least Speedwagon is happy. And so with the defeat of Dio, all that's left is to wrap everything up nice and neat. The first part of that is all the side characters waving goodbye to a recently married Jonathan and Irina as they sail off to America for their honeymoon on a cruise. And some sort of mysterious box is loaded on the ship, but I'm sure it won't be too important. The two talk about how glad they are to be together and what they'll do with the rest of their lives. But wait, a zombified poison tail from earlier is on board, and when Jonathan tries to give chase, he discovers that Dio is still alive! Now reduced to just a head and wishing to take Jonathan's body for his own, which I find particularly disturbing for some reason that I feel only one of those hypnotherapists could figure out. Dio uses his eye fluids from before, this time managing to hit Jonathan's neck and making him unable to breathe, but very much able to continue talking at length about how much Dio sucks. It turns out that the entire ship is actually filled with zombies as they kill a mother carrying her child. Jojo manages to use a final Hamon attack to decapitate Wang Chen and stop the ship engines, eventually causing it to overheat and explode, setting the ship on fire. Irina wants to die on her husband's side, but Jonathan prompts her to take the infant child and live on. Jonathan grabs onto Dio's head to prevent him from escaping, and Dio tries to convince Jonathan to start a traveling show with him singing two heads are better than one, but Jonathan ends up dying holding Dio's head in his arms and the ship explodes. We see as the sun rises that Irina, the baby, had managed to escape in Dio's coffin. Remember this detail, it'll become hilarious later, and we hear from Irina's inner monologue that she is also pregnant, allowing the series to continue without having to change the name.
しかし、それはまた新たな冒険の時代の始まりでもあった。
Is part 1 really deserving of all the negativity it gets? Not at all. While true, it is a little generic, especially when compared to other parts of the series, but everything has to start somewhere, and Phantom Blood is a great way to start off. Dio is a great antagonist, and though he doesn't have the most compelling of motivations, being described in the part itself as... he definitely manages to carry a scene and is intimidating as hell. Of course, Dio isn't the thing most people complain about. The problem most people have with this part is Jonathan as the protagonist. The most common complaint being, he's boring. However, I feel that there's nothing wrong with Jonathan having a noble nature, particularly in contrast with Dio, as the dichotomy between the two works the best out of any hero-villain relationships in this series. And the idea that a protagonist is simply a nice guy isn't inherently a bad thing, and fortunately there are quite a few more Jonathan fans popping up recently, which is well-deserved as he is a good character and his tragic end ultimately ends up making him that much more compelling and easy to sympathize with. On that note, I personally am not usually a fan of killing off characters whom I feel as though have more stories that can be told. However, it was in that decision that brought us the generational protagonists the series is known for, and in that led to some of the most beloved moments in the series. Ultimately, while this part has its problems and the series still has a bit of time to get its signature identity, Phantom Blood is an excellent start to this adventure and definitely worth checking out.